Hi, hello. This is Dr. Stacia Alexander. Thank you for joining me on the fourth installment. Is this the fourth? No, the third. This is the third installment of the Emotionality of Politics. And why did I choose this to do as a series this time? I don't think that needs an explanation. We're all going through this wave of emotions, and the more people that I talk to, the more I realize that it was perfectly good timing. I'm seeing other therapists that are talking more openly about the connection between our emotions and politics. So I am in excellent company. Yes. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is Dr. Stacia Alexander. I host Goals Don't Have Feelings, and I normally have co-hosts Tasha and Nisha. They sit next to me, but we're all virtual now. But this is our third year doing this show. The show really is focused on the emotionality of success. And the reason I focus on that is because not enough people talk about that journey that we go on our route to success. We go to school, we get an education, we may have an apprenticeship or a mentoring program that we're a part of. We get financial assistance from our accountants and legal advice from counselors, branding, PR people. All of these things are put around us to make sure that logistically our path to success is sound, but rarely do these people talk to you about your emotions unless something falls apart. Don't be mad. It'll be okay. Come on, you can do this, boosting you up, but they don't talk to you preventively, like proactively, to talk about what you can expect on this journey. So these conversations that I have truly highlight that journey. I do series just because, I don't know. I think it makes more of an impact if you can get several people from different walks of life to talk about one topic. It's worked before. This is my third series I've done, and I enjoy it. So we'll go back to our regular routine of having an episode once a month. You never know. Things change constantly in 2020. But as a licensed professional counselor, I've ran a private practice in the Dallas area. I've had as many as 3 locations, but I've scaled back. Not just because of COVID, but just because of experience. And I also am the director over the counseling center at Paul Quinn College, which is in Dallas. In addition to that, my husband and I co-authored a book with our children. They're adults now, but we co-authored a book called The Balancing Act Family Guide. That book is basic principles on parenting that we think people could use in their everyday routines of parenting their children and really understanding what their role is and what the role of their kids are and respecting the voice that their kids have. So that's a book I really encourage you to get, and you can get that on my website at www.staciaalexander.com. You can also find information on other programming that I run, such as these series. And then I have a great decompressing program coming on the week of the election. So that Thursday, we're going to do the emotionality of politics, but not necessarily from me interviewing people, but actually me giving you some skills and some tools and some things to decompress from what we've all experienced through this election process. So make sure you register on my website, or the link will be on this Facebook Live. Make sure you register. www.staciaalexander. That's going to be Thursday after the election, that night after the election at 7 p.m. So make sure you sign up for that. So tonight, I want you to join me as I talk to someone who is running for a school board place in Little Elm, Texas. And I'm just now meeting her. I did my research. I was really interested in her platform. One, because she comes from a mental health background. I'm like, well, what is she doing? Does she want to bring mental health into the schools? But her reason for running for school board is a lot broader than that. And I'm so glad that I reached out to her. It was definitely a cold call, reached out to her. So as I prepared to bring her in for the interview virtually into our room, make sure that you stop, invite somebody to this conversation. We're definitely going to make that tie between local politics, national politics as it relates to the education of our kids, which is pretty relevant right now with everything that's going on virtually and with the pandemic. But I want you to invite people to this conversation. And then if you feel really technically savvy, if you will host a watch party and people will see it on your page, so then they'll join in on the interview as well. So take a few minutes to do that. And while I'm giving you guys some time to do that, how many of you actually have been involved in what the school board does in your community? I'm not that person. I followed some things when they redrew all of the lines in our district and got pretty upset about how it all panned out. So upset that I ended up taking our kids out of the local school system. I just didn't feel like our voices were heard. But talking with Dr. Thompson, learning a lot, I know that we can offer some really good suggestions on ways that you guys can do that. So let me know in the chat, yes, I've been involved, or I've watched my local school board movement and what they do, or no. I just kind of want to know from the audience who all has been involved with that. And then let me know if you have children that are in school right now. Are they enrolled? Are they active? How are you guys dealing with some of the things that are being decided? Because from the chat room that I'm in with some moms in our city, a lot of them are still raising kids in the school district. And it's almost like things are changing every day. So let us know that in the chat and let me know how it's going. So let me get Dr. Monique Thompson on. Again, she's running for a school board position in Little Elm. So we'll know this time next week, we'll know if she was successful. I really hope she is, because I think she has a great platform. The emotionality of politics is great. And I'm glad that she has, I'm saying the emotionality of politics is a great discussion for her to participate in, because she does have such a vocal presence in her community. Remember, she's a mental health clinician. She's running for candidate, and she understands what I'm talking about for the emotionality of politics. She gets all of that. So that's why I think she'd be, I'm pretty confident that she's going to be a great guest, and you guys really need to tune in. So thank you, Dr. Johnson, for joining me. You are definitely a busy person. Tell us all about the roles you're juggling right now. They won't be it. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Thompson. You are definitely a busy person, so I'm glad that I was able to get on your schedule for this weekend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Excellent. So I did go on your website, and while I'm not a resident of Little Elm, I was totally immersed in learning about you and your run for the school board. Can you share with us a little bit what your reason for running for school board election?
Yes, definitely. I had been attending school board meetings last year as a parent. I was brought into the advocacy experience within my local school district because of my youngest daughter's teacher. I pop into the schools all the time. And this particular visit, she had 25 students in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And typically I'm not there in the classroom when all the students were in there. So I'd never physically seen that much going on. And my daughter, my youngest at the time, was in first grade. Mm-hmm. You can imagine the chaos in a room of 25 kids, but her teacher was just so elegantly handling it. And I was like, I am just stunned. And I admire, what you're doing. I was like, how are you doing that? I'm like, now some of these kids leave, they go to another classroom. And she said, no, everybody's in. I said, you had 25 kids. And so she happened to have the talent. Mm-hmm. Have the classroom management talent to handle that. But I was concerned because I then kind of asked a few parents and found out, it was overcrowding in all the schools. Mm-hmm. And then doing some more research, I learned that the school board had decided not to give the kids iPads until fourth grade. And that they had voted on that. So this particular teacher, she said, I only have 4 iPads. I said, 4 iPads, 25 kids. You don't have any iPads. And I said, well, when are the rest of your iPads? She said, well, I don't know when they're coming. So that's really what started it all, is I was just trying to email people and reach out and find out where my daughter's teachers' iPads were. So I go to the school board meeting. I meet with one of the school board members. He was very gracious, very kind. All of them are very approachable. So I was able to talk to him at length. And I said, well, so when will she get the rest of her iPads? And he said, well, we voted for them not to get them until fourth grade. And I remember standing out, I was just shocked. I said, well, why? Why would you do that, right? Why would you do that? I have a nonprofit. I work with kids. We only use technology. I'm an online instructor, University of Phoenix, 11 years, entirely technology. And that is the wave of the way things are going pretty much for everybody, is the tech. So I was stunned by what could substantiate that decision making. I began going to the school board meetings. I I never really got a clear understanding of the strategy. So that's what I started noticing was missing. And then I did a little bit of research to see, well, I'm in this group called CLASS, which is for community leaders. And so I started attending those to interact with the district. But it's more one-way communication where they're basically telling the community about the district. Okay. But then there's not a space for dialogue so that you can give input. Then there's another committee that I'm on with the District Education Improvement Commission. Well, same situation there where there's really not an open space for dialogue. And then as a parent, there was no two-way communication space. So I kept noticing that gap, right? That there's not a way for dialogue. And I noticed that there were only private Facebook groups for people to kind of interact with district members. And so I just was like that drew me into what can I do to help? I come from a background of working in the heart of South Dallas. I worked with Title I schools, creating and running after school programs. I worked with St. Philip School and Community Center, Girls Night Out program, writing curriculum for that program. So I'm very familiar with how the community can come together. And I was just constantly, like, I've now been at all these meetings. I've met all these people. And I'm like, my discovery process was we just have a gap. We just have a gap. And we did not, as far as back as I could research in the district, we had not had an educator on the board anywhere that I could find for the last decade or so. Right. Right. And our elections are we have elections every year with opposite seats. So there's a couple of seats up for election every year. So I still don't know how that has happened. We don't have any history of educators actually on the school board. Right. So another gap. So I said, okay, my practice is 20 years running as of 2021. I've been at SMU. This is my 18th year. Everywhere I've been for a long time. And people know who are in your professions. You get into a rhythm. Right. For a long time. So on paper, it looks like I got a lot going on. And technically I do, but I've been at these places for so long that I have a rhythm to my day, this thing and that. Right. I had the time. And
in the midst of everything going on in an election full cycle, like how are you handling all of that? Like you're running for school board, but we got a racial crisis going on. We got health pandemic going on. And then the, election of the United States of America. How are you finding balance in all of that?
Well, so the irony is that my oldest is here, and she made me frustrated with me this morning because she has a lip gloss business that she runs out of our home. And so Howard University has closed its doors. So in addition to all of what you just mentioned, we have a college student in her first year virtually schooling, our second grader virtually schooling, and I'm 100% telemedicine. But actually, it helps because there's not as much ripping and running. Any parent that, if you're out here in the suburbs, you've got to drive your child everywhere. So that's eliminated some things. 2020 has, really pushed us all to find new ways to cope with stress. Mm-hmm. So I happen to be a practitioner, a mental health practitioner. Mm-hmm. So I have many, many tools in my toolkit. I use them all. I will say that 2020 has made me use everything I know in intentional and direct use of every mental health trick I know versus kind of, if you're a practitioner, you've been doing it for a long time, things to do to take care of yourself, things not to do. I protect my sleep. Mm-hmm. I know to make sure that I sleep well every night or most nights. During this campaign, Mr. Thompson, I teasingly call him Big Daddy Wonderfulness, the Unconquerable. He's like, you stay up all the time. I'm like, actually, I don't. I know how to make sure that I get a good night's sleep. And that if I have to stay up late, the next night I have to sleep well. Right. And so I take my sleep. I get plenty of water. I manage my vitamin intake. I make sure I'm nutritionally sustaining myself, even if I have a busy day. So there's a lot. I happen to know a lot of mental health tricks, and I use them all. Our house is a lot of natural light. There's a view of the lake from my front window, and the kids in our cul-de-sac play almost every day, but I love the sound of kids playing.
Mm-hmm.
So in the afternoons, I can hear them outside playing and I can see the lake. And that actually adds a lot of beauty and fun to my day. So that's one of the things that has helped me, is that because everybody's home, I get to see them more. We eat at home more.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that my daughter's skin is clearer. I mean, just little things, you know, everybody. You know.
We did the same thing when my daughter came home from college. It was like, okay, we can work on this. We were all on YouTube making soap and everything.
Oh,
but you know, one thing that I realized when you talk about mental health clinicians really using every tool they have in the toolbox is that this is the first time in my life as a professional that I've ever gone through the same crisis that my clients are going through at the same time. Like it may have been somebody's, you know, lost a loved one. I lost a loved one years ago. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm fine. I'm separated from that emotionally. I've dealt with my stuff. But this is the first time that I've actively had to go through a crisis like we're living in the United States and walk my clients through that same crisis. And so I had to build another toolbox. How about that? Everything that I had in my toolbox, I had to go build another toolbox and pick up 2 new hobbies in order to stretch my reserve, because it was just so much at the beginning of the pandemic to balance all of that out.
It is. And even for me, the social disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of your family celebrations that you just can't do.
Right.
And get-togethers that you just can't do. I've had this year, I have 2 new great nieces and 1 new great nephew.
Okay.
In the middle of the pandemic. So even kind of, you know, the baby showers and going, you can't do any of those, you know. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where we are on that. You find other ways to connect. One of my nieces messaged, "Can you FaceTime?" And I'm like, yeah, we could FaceTime, you know, and kind of emotionally getting yourself to a place where you appreciate having someone to FaceTime versus being annoyed that you have to FaceTime.
Right.
You know?
And you know, with all of this going on, like, do you think that because of the race crisis and because of the pandemic, that this is why we're having such a tumultuous election process, that there is a lot more emotionality that's being expressed? Or do you think that's why?
You know, and I'm no expert on how the internet has provoked us. Mm-hmm. I would actually say it has been our access to information. So our overexposure. Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, you could only watch the news so much. You could see on TV at a certain time, it was going off. The TV itself turned off at a certain time.
Yeah.
You once upon a time, you mostly visited the TV and lived your life. Well, now your information is at your fingertips all day long. And people with all kinds of information that can provoke you can be easily accessed by that information. Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of such tender and sensitive topics, right? That it makes you wonder, what would this have looked like during the 1960s if we had Facebook Lives if we had Facebook Lives of people at the polls trying to vote and being attacked by dogs. If we had a Facebook Live of the bridge in Birmingham, you know, how would we have all reacted to crisis at Central High if there's a Facebook Live? So it's not that we have so many new events. It's that we're able to be brought right into the direct experience of real time. Yeah, we're not watching the news and seeing footage. Or just actually, the print news was once upon a time. You know, you didn't see any video.
That's what I was thinking. Even reading
versus seeing video footage.
Yeah,
right. You're having the person's experience, so that's even new. Even as the news was kind of building this technology, what we have now we've never had before, which is the actual person as they're experiencing something, posting a live video of an actual crime that's being committed against them, or people watching a crime being committed, as in George Floyd. We've never had that happen before. So you really want to make sure that you probably think about that. I've now been exposed to a significant stressor.
Mm-hmm.
Any human being exposed to stress needs to take intentional action to recover the body back to a place of peace. And by that, I mean that your nervous system, and I'm just talking clinical terms, your nervous system is in the parasympathetic nervous system, where your heart rate is low and rhythmic, your breathing is deep and cleansing, your activity level is up here in the front of your brain, not in the back, and you are in a thinking mode. So my clue I give to my patients is, if you are agitated, do not trust it. Do not trust the agitated brain. It doesn't have any good ideas. It just looks like a good idea. Mm-hmm. As soon as you calm down days later and you look back at the site, you're going to say, I should have just waited.
That's why you should send that email. That's why those emails stay in my queue for a while. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. November 4th.
Didn't do it.
You know, well, November 4th, when we get these election results.
November 4th, the day after. Yeah.
It's November 4th. If you are in an emotionally sensitive place, just wait till you calm down. You'll calm down. Wait till you calm down. You will calm down. And when you're calm, that's when you communicate. So those two C's go together. When you are calm.
I'm having a debriefing on that Thursday after the election, just to wrap all of this up, the emotionality of politics. And I tell you why I'm doing that. My daughter, she was in school during the last election when 45 won. And I told her when she was going to bed, more than likely he's going to win. So just wrap your mind around it, right? We woke up the next morning. She found out that he won. She actually cried. And I felt like, okay, let me comfort her through this. She was what? She's a senior in college now. So she was a senior in high school, right? Probably junior or senior. But I could tell that she was emotional about it. Okay, let's, get a good breakfast, love on you. We're going to pray. We're going to send you on your way. I severely underestimated the response at her school. Severely underestimated how insensitive the student population would be in that particular election. And she was devastated when she came back home at the end of the day, and wondered why they had to be so mean about triumph. And I told her that obviously there were not discussions held in the household about respecting people in their own preferences, that everyone has a reason for wanting to vote for someone. That doesn't mean that you should be demeaned or teased or ridiculed because of who you would have preferred to win. That was an awakening for me, that as adults, we're not the only ones watching all of this come out across the sound waves, news waves, whatever, that we also have these emerging adults who are about to come out into society. And we have these children behind us who are watching everything that we do as we watch those televisions in our household, how we talk to each other. So for her, that was an awakening, because she said, we didn't act like that when Obama won. We just didn't. We didn't come in teasing people. We knew they were upset. We didn't do that. And I told them, this is real life. This is what we need to discuss more openly. So I think that's another reason why this time I'm talking about the emotionality of success, of politics, because people don't realize this is nonsense, the way they react to each other during the election period. Even though I may not like your decision, I can respect your right to make that decision. Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay. Hey, keep my hands away from the keyboard. Even though I don't like your decision, I need to respect your decision. And respect is probably the bigger thing here. Uh-huh. Really, really the biggest thing here. If we don't have respect for each other, then we end up in more and more chaos.
Right.
And truly, I need us to all accept that some of the chaos that we think is so far back in the past is not really in the past. It's just happening across our borders. People are having civil war is going on right now in other countries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We don't have a civil war, a violent civil war where people are marching up and down streets with guns, snatching people out of homes, mm-hmm. and things like that going on. But I remember when we watched Hotel Rwanda. My husband watched Hotel Rwanda. And I remember wondering how old were we when this was happening? And so
yeah.
I looked, I said, you know what? I was grown. I was not an adult with a family, but I was grown.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that and I said, in America, we're so far removed from some of the pain in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can lullaby us to sleep on the need to have respect for differing opinions,
mm-hmm.
space for everyone to believe what they believe, mm-hmm. but some kind of rule of law on how far your belief needs to impact my quality of life.
Right.
And that, I think, is what is kind of tenuous about this election, is that we see people's quality of life being threatened, people sending these threatening emails, mm-hmm. and this threat of life and limb. And that could escalate easily.
Oh, yeah.
Easily. And our leadership, things like what you're doing, this is an important discussion, mm-hmm. that we talk about what we expect of each other, what we expect about, like you said, the household. Why didn't they talk about that? Talking with your children about what you expect of them. My daughter, my youngest, I asked her, is anybody better than you? No. Are you better than anybody else? No. But are you my favorite little kid in the whole wide world? Yes. You're my favorite 7-year-old ever. And when you turn 8, you'll be my favorite 8-year-old ever. Now she is a little sister after all, so she has an issue. It makes us call her the first one later, because it's not fair that her older sister will always be the firstborn.
Number one. So what do you think all who have a stake in their local school system should be concerned about as it relates to the national election happening? And I ask that because I never knew such issues were happening on a federal level until, is it DeVos? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Jese DeVos.
Until all of that stuff started coming up in the news, I was like, what in the world? Like, can you make that connection between national and local and why people should be concerned?
Yeah. So what you want to think about is, let's look at your actual school. The school your child goes to. Where you're going to notice your most experiences in that classroom. Your student's classroom is where you see the biggest issue, right? Your child brings home a 0 or is failing a class, which is happening right now in Fort Worth, where they've got most kids failing at least one class. Your kid is in the class and you're in the middle of a connectivity gap and you don't know what to do. So you want this problem solved literally in your child's classroom, in your school district. Uh-huh. So if you think about it that way, that on your ballot, even, you want to start at the bottom and work your way up. Okay. Everybody at the bottom, the closer you get to the bottom, the closer you get to home. I saw somebody say that on Facebook. I'm like, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. The closer you get to bottom, the closer you get to home. Okay. So when you think about even stuff like your funding, you also want to think about that way. Whatever she's saying is just an opinion, really, because what's really going to affect your school district the most are your federal laws and your federal funding. Okay. But your local school board is mostly self-governing. In Texas, they're self-governing. There's nobody over your Texas school, your school board, your district school board.
Oh, really?
Independent school district. So your school board is governing your school district, and there's no one over the school board of your district. But the federal government's guidelines have to be followed, don't they? Yes, they do. And there's the funding stream, to some extent, can dictate some of the experience of your school. I'll give an example of purchasing textbooks. Okay. So your school district can't just decide we're purchasing those textbooks. There's a textbook that's going to be allowed, and your school can choose between these. But then the funding for that is coming through a stream that's both federal and state. So your tax dollars do help support your school, but your school's funding is coming from property tax, from state, and from federal funding. And that's where federal piece. So you really want a mouthpiece on your education committee in Austin. You want a mouthpiece there. Okay. You want somebody there that's saying, well, are we going to provide free pre-K? Are we going to fund free pre-K? And so then you say, well, Okay, if they say they're going to fund free pre-K, how are we going to actually provide that? Do we even have space in our district for that? So that's where your decision making happens, is at your actual school board.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. So nobody can make your school board do anything.
Okay. So the information that we were seeing when she was first in talking about cutting funding and
they're going to affect you, right? So think about that, funding and law.
Okay.
When you think like, how can somebody in DC affect me at home? Funding and law.
Gotcha. Okay.
Funding. I'll give you an easy example. Here in Little M, all the five elementary schools are Title I.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, they're required to have a parent involvement meeting, a two-way communication parent involvement meeting. That was one of my concerns, is I was like, are we having this kind of meeting? Mm-hmm. Well, they have to have it because it is a federal law.
Okay.
Right. How they go about doing it, then they can decide how to go about it. But that they have it, it has to be done. So, yeah.
The board that decides the representatives, like you said, there were no educators on the board. Shouldn't it just be a given that it was educators on the board?
Well, so I learned this from researching. I honestly, so all your school board members, you can go to anybody's school board page and you can see information about them. Like, you kind of look me up, right? And so I'm just reading. And then I go back as far as I could to the next year. And the next year, I'm like, well, these are just nice people. They're nice people and they bring concern. Nobody gets paid on the school board. So you bring your mutual concern for the district to get better. But it's like creating a team. You want to have this person with this strength, that person with that strength, this person. Well, there weren't any educators. And that basically just meant that an educator hadn't run and won. But even as I look back over the past elections, I didn't see any educators that had run for office even. So on your local school board, you have to run for office. It's a popular vote. So that's different from your presidential election, right? So it's a popular vote. You however many votes you get, you win. And then our district is a single member district, meaning that all 7 of those seats represent every citizen in Little M, whereas some are precincts. So in some school districts, you represent a certain area of your district and someone else represents a certain area. Ours is a single member district. So whenever they have an election, that person is representing the whole town. And that's how you get on or off the school board, is by getting voted in. So an educator just hadn't run, and we'd had several, too many to count, unopposed elections. My experience this election cycle, and there was Shirley Chisholm, one of my heroes. Mm-hmm. She talked about this in one of her YouTube videos. She's like, she said, Colin Powell told me y'all were gonna do this. Make us feel like you can't run. So in my experience deciding to run, one of the obstacles I faced was this sense of, can I run? And technically, to run, you fill out your candidacy application and you run.
Okay.
In many small towns, especially, or at the local level, there's a feeling of certain people need to pull you in or give you the nod in order for you to run. And anybody who's watching this, I want to encourage you that is certainly not the case. Okay. Not a person who's been in politics, and I'm literally a mother who went to my first graders classroom and was like, where all these kids come from? Where's all your equipment? Who do I talk to? And then as I tried to talk to people, I said, I need to talk to me. I need to put myself on the board and be the change I want to see, because there's only so much you can do from the other side of that door. So anybody on that local level, if you're concerned about how you'll feel on November 4th, get involved in your local level. Okay. Get involved at the local level. Your school is a wonderful place to get involved. I love kids, so they give me a really, really good feeling. You know, and somehow I end up interacting with some student almost every day. So last night, like in the middle of the night, I get a message from one of our students. He was like, where do I go vote? I'm like, that's right, you're old enough to vote this year. You know, I'm like, 7 to 7. I gave him the address and everything, and it just made me feel so good. I was like, he can vote this year. And I was like, I'm just so proud of you. I'm texting him. I said, take some friends. Take some friends. you to vote. And he was like, yes, ma'am, Miss Monique. I'm like, that made me feel so good. And that's what you feel. When you get involved with your local level, your local stuff, you get a feel-good feeling because you can see your immediate change. You can see that change right there in front of you. You can
the results.
The results. Yeah. And so sometimes when you get overwhelmed, you feel like the president is this person or the president is that person. Your sidewalks need fixing. That's your local.
Yeah, that's local.
You don't like when things start getting local.
What would you advise someone who is running for a local election, like kind of walk them through emotionally, 3 things that you know they need to prepare themselves for?
If you're getting ready for the local election, 3 things to prepare yourself for. One is your local elections are going to open up at a certain time and you file. And filing sounds like a big thing. It is just a piece of paper. You're really needing to verify that you meet the minimum qualifications to run in your local election, which is basically that you're a resident of the area. And in some places that you don't have, for example, a felony or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it's a very straightforward process. You may have to get your application notarized. I mean, it's really not an elaborate thing. You fill out the candidate application, you turn it in, and really application is a strong word. You're filing your paper to run. Unless you somehow don't meet the minimum qualifications of that role, then you're going to be on the ballot. So it's not really an elaborate process. So that's number one, is you need to file to run. The second part of it is thinking about a campaign. Who runs to lose? I mean, I'm running to win. I fully expect to, run my own race and run. And by saying coming up with a campaign plan, I ran a clean race. That was very, very important to me, to run a clean race. And so you have to think about, well, why am I running? What am I trying to do? Am I just disgruntled and I don't like that person, but I don't really think I can actually do a better job? I just don't like them. Then, reconsider why you're running. And maybe you just need to be a part of someone else's campaign, find a qualified candidate and support them. Think about what you bring to the table and where could you fit in local politics. There's a lot of spaces.
Right.
I mean, a lot of spaces at the local level, and often they run unopposed. That's just because nobody filed and ran. It's not because they couldn't have been opposed. They just aren't. The elections for your local are never as tedious as these national ones. And this is a unique year that the local elections are taking so long. Usually you're only going to be campaigning for about 2 months.
Okay.
So it's about 2 months of your life gone. Just 2 months of your life gone. And you can budget for it at a reasonable budget. At the campaign level, the local level, depending on what city you live in. So obviously a city like Dallas is going to have a larger span of coverage than you would in a smaller town. But you can do a local election within a reasonable amount of time. But what you want to really be thinking about is, am I doing harm or am I bringing good? And if you bring good,
because let's recap the 3. You said 1,
file,
and then the second thing.
The second is to determine what you're bringing to the table.
And then the third,
think about your campaign. What am I bringing to this campaign? What am I bringing to the table? And then the third is, if you're not the person, then support someone who is.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Don't just not run. Find somebody who is the good candidate and support someone who is.
That makes a lot of sense. So what do you think? What do you think the emotional fallout will be? Like you said on the 4th, what do you think?
I think there are going to be a lot of people who feel powerless. And whenever people feel powerless, then sometimes they act out. Sometimes they try to seize power. But the agitation of feeling powerless goes away when you do something productive with that experience. It goes away.
That makes sense. Because I think that's how, I'm just speaking from our experience, that's how we felt after the last election, powerless. And now you've seen a lot of people, is the word galvanized, and you see this rise in registrations and voter outcomes, because now people understand the power of their vote. I think a lot more people understand the power of their one vote and what it could mean for their lives.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
A good conversation. You know, I need to have therapists on more often because I actually get lost in the conversation because it's good. You know, like we're bringing shop talk to layman's terms. Like this is what we talk about in our conferences, in our staff and case studies and all of that. But when it gets down to, you know, the general population, this is how you convey it. This is how you remove the stigma of mental health. Like all of this into our everyday lives. So I appreciate it. It was good.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Now, hold up your sleeves. Let me see your sweater. Hold up your sleeve.
Hold up my Let's pull up the sweater.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And I just saw, you know, when you raised your hand, I saw it and I was like, wait a minute, what did she just do? So yes, hello, Sarah. I did not realize that.
We should have figured that out.
Should have figured that out. Pretty quick.
Too much high caliber going on. We should have figured that out.
Should have figured that out. That's
oh my
God. So you guys, that was a great interview with Dr. Thompson. You can find her on her, she has LinkedIn pages and she has a wonderful website that definitely details all of her information, and she's on Facebook as well. So make sure that you follow her on all of her sites. Yes, the emotionality of politics spins through all levels of our lives, including the school system. Consider how our emergency services were handled this time at the beginning of the pandemic. And I asked you guys at the beginning of the live, you know, are you involved in your local school board politics or how they are ran in your particular district? Are you paying attention to that? I asked you, do you have some kids? So just let me know below, how much attention have you paid to it? And do you have some kids that are being impacted by the decisions that are made now? After talking with Dr. Thompson, I can definitely see how us paying attention before there is a crisis and getting involved in the solution process helps move that crisis a little bit better than if we were not involved and not paying attention. The important thing that I think is resonating through these conversations that I'm having is that they needed to be had. Some people are walking around in a daze. Some people aren't really paying attention to what's going on, but a lot of us are realizing that this political climate is having a punch. It's a punch to our psyche, and we need to pay attention to it and stop acting like it doesn't exist. So thank you for joining us for this conversation. It's one of a series. If you missed the prior ones, please go back to my Facebook channel at Goals Don't Have Feelings, or you can go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Stacia Alexander. Just engage in the conversation, watch these videos because they're really talking about how politics impacts us emotionally on different levels. If you haven't already, do me a favor by following me on Facebook, YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. I provide relevant content for mental health, bringing it from the classroom to your living room, really talking about how this is intricately involved in your life. So thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next installment of the Emotionality of Politics, and then make sure you register. This is your reminder to register for the Emotionality of Politics decompression session, if you will, so that we can talk about ways to overcome all of these elevated moods that we're having and how to really adjust after the election season is over. Thank you again. I appreciate you for watching. I'm Dr. Stacia Alexander, your host of Goals Don't Have Feelings.